Jasmine Crockett was told it would be a fair interview. Nothing too heated, just a back and forth about civil rights. Her team had even said the host, Piers Morgan, was looking for strong voices and promised it would be respectful. So when Jasmine arrived at the studio that morning, she expected a conversation. Instead, she walked into something else entirely. Not chaos, not drama, just something off. The kind of quiet tension you only pick up when you've spent enough time in rooms where you're not really welcome, just tolerated. The studio was clean and sharp, with everything in its place. But the people? Not as smooth. One makeup artist gave her a look but said nothing. The guy behind the camera avoided her eyes. Even the assistant producer, who she greeted with a warm hello, didn't answer right away. It wasn't obvious, but it was enough to let her know something was coming. Jasmine didn't flinch. She'd grown up in Shreveport, Louisiana. Her mom worked in a school cafeteria. Her dad drove trucks for a living. She'd earned her place, step by step, through law school, through courtrooms, through long days serving her community. Now a congresswoman from Texas, she wasn't there to be liked. She was there to speak the truth. And that kind of truth doesn't need noise. It just needs a mic. Piers Morgan was already seated when she walked in. He didn't get up. He didn't even really look at her. Just a quick nod, then back to his notes. She sat across from him, adjusted her mic, and gave a polite smile. "Good morning," she said. He returned it, but only halfway. The kind of smile that's more for the cameras than for the person sitting across from him. The countdown began. Lights warmed up. "We're live in 30 seconds, someone called. Jasmine shifted slightly in her seat, posture straight, hands still. She was used to being underestimated, but she wasn't going to shrink. Not today. Chat. 2. 1. The music faded and Piers leaned into his practiced voice. Today we're joined by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a rising figure in the Democratic Party, and someone with, let's say, very strong views on race and policing in America. Jasmine smiled. Calm. Measured. Then came the first question. It sounded polite enough, but anyone paying attention could hear the trap underneath. "You often talk about systemic racism in America," Piers said. "But this country elected a black president twice and now has a black female vice president. Doesn't that show we've already made a lot of progress?" Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't rush her answer. She just smiled, the kind of smile that says, "You have no idea what's coming next." The moment the lights hit and the camera rolled, Piers Morgan leaned into the kind of line he thought would sound clever. "Congresswoman," he said with a slight smile, "you talk a lot about injustice in America. But this is a country that elected a black president, twice, and now has a black female vice president. Doesn't that prove we've already made a lot of progress?" It was smooth, polished. The kind of question that pretends to be honest but is actually a setup. The goal was clear. Make Jasmine look unreasonable, like someone stuck in the past, ignoring all the good things. But she didn't even blink. She didn't rush. Just met his eyes and said, "Progress doesn't cancel what's still broken. It just shows we've come far enough to keep going." Piers shifted in his chair, trying to press a little harder. "But you use some strong words," he said. "You've compared police actions to state violence. Isn't that a bit dramatic? Emotionally driven? This wasn't curiosity. It was a move. Frame her as unstable, as someone too emotional to be taken seriously." But Jasmine didn't get pulled in. She kept her voice steady. "Yes, I feel things," she said, "because I've seen mothers bury sons who never made it to 20. I've seen families torn apart. That's not drama. That's reality. But I don't come here with feelings. I come with facts." Piers wasn't listening. He was fishing. "Isn't it exhausting?" he asked next, "constantly painting America as the villain?" There it was, subtle but sharp, a question dressed as concern, but underneath it said, "Stop talking about this stuff. You're making us uncomfortable." Jasmine leaned back slightly, calm as ever. "Maybe you've just gotten too used to sitting in the audience," she said. "It's easy to call things exhausting when you're not the one living through them." The control room behind the scenes had gone still. The makeup artist froze with her brush halfway up. A tech whispered something without taking his eyes off the screen. This wasn't going how they'd expected, and it was only getting deeper. Piers took another swing. "After the Johnson case, you spoke out against the police before the full investigation came out, but the officer was later cleared. Doesn't that show you jumped the gun?" He thought he had her. He thought this would be the moment where she'd fumble or fold. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned forward just a little. "Do you think a system that clears officers 99% of the time is automatically fair?" she asked. "Or is it possible the system itself needs to be looked at?" He opened his mouth, but she kept going. "You want facts? Let's use them. 2 teenagers were shot in Mississippi during a traffic stop. No weapons. Body cam was off. Officers cleared in days. Their families are still waiting for answers. That was the shift. Not loud, not dramatic, but something in the air changed." Piers's voice had been leading the room. Now it wasn't. And then came the moment he thought would land hard. "You come across as angry," he said carefully. "Not analytical." It was quiet for a second. Not the kind of quiet where people aren't paying attention, the kind where everyone stops breathing. Jasmine placed her hands gently on the desk. "Do you ask Senator Burr the same thing when he pounds the desk and shouts on this show?" she said. "Do you pause the segment to comment on his tone?" She wasn't yelling. She wasn't even raising her voice. But the words cut deep. "Is passion only a problem when it's coming from someone like me?" Piers tried to move on, but she didn't let him. She wasn't just answering now. She was turning the whole thing into a mirror. "I come across as angry to you," she said, "because I don't ask permission to speak, because I don't soften my voice to make you feel more comfortable. But everything I've said here is based on something you haven't mentioned once: experience." He looked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words fast enough. She wasn't done. "I don't need your approval to tell the truth," she said. "And I don't need your style to prove I've done the work. You brought talking points. I brought reality." A couple of quiet hums came from the audience. Someone near the back whispered, "She's got him." Piers adjusted his notes. Blank. Pages now. Just something to hold on to. For the first time since the segment started, he wasn't leading anymore. Jasmine wasn't just answering questions. She was controlling the room. And everyone could feel it. Piers thought he could still guide the conversation. But Jasmine had already taken the wheel, and now she hit the gas. She sat up straighter, eyes clear and voice calm, and said, "You once called black protesters in Minneapolis a violent mob, but just a few months later, when truck drivers in Idaho were blocking highways over vaccine rules, you called them patriots. Same method, same disruption. Different color, different headline." That line didn't shout. It didn't need to. A quiet gasp moved through the audience, followed by a small cough, then silence. The control room behind the glass froze. On set, a camera assistant dropped his hand from the focus ring and stared at the monitor. Something in the room had shifted, and everyone felt it. Piers didn't know where to look. His eyes darted to his notes, but he didn't speak. Jasmine didn't wait. "You want facts?" she said. "Let's talk about 3. She counted them out with her fingers. Simple, clear, heavy. 1. Aaron Lowe, Pasadena, 2021. Pulled over for a broken tail light. Hands up the whole time. Shot twice. The officer said he thought Aaron was reaching. Internal review cleared him. Body cam footage? Missing for 6 months. When it came back, it was edited. The weight of the story hit like a stone. 2. Rhonda, Belton, Cleveland. Called 911 because her ex was trying to break in. Police showed up and arrested her. She yelled too loudly, they said. She lost her job. Charges dropped. No apology. No news. 3. March 2022. Right here on this show, you said you didn't believe institutional racism existed in policing. That was 3 days after a federal report showed a pattern of abuse against black drivers in 8 major cities. Full video. Sworn testimony, numbers in black and white. You called it not convincing. Not because the proof was missing, because it didn't fit your angle. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean in. She let the truth sit there and take up space. I'm not bitter, Mr. Morgan, she added. I'm tired. Tired of having to prove I belong in every room. Tired of acting like pain has to be polite before it counts. Tired of pretending silence is strength. In the control room, a producer waved toward the floor, trying to signal for commercial. But the director didn't move. He just shook his head, eyes locked on the screen. No one was cutting away. Jasmine could feel the tension building. But she wasn't done. You once tweeted that kneeling during the anthem was performative theater. She paused, then delivered the hit. What would you call walking off your own show in a huff because someone criticized you about Meghan Markle? The audience sucked in air, not a scream, not laughter, just a pure, unfiltered shock. Piers froze, not angry, just exposed. His face didn't move, but his hand clenched around his pen. He had no words. Jasmine didn't press harder. She didn't have to. You call it a meltdown or a moment of honesty, she said. But you still sit here pretending you're the adult in the room, pretending emotion discredits my words, but not yours. There was no performance in her voice, no grand pose. She was just steady, strong in the kind of way that leaves no cracks for someone to slip through. She glanced back at him. You built your career by questioning other people's voices. So be ready when someone questions yours. That's not attack. It's balance. Piers opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I didn't come here for a viral moment, Jasmine said. I came because there are families out there burying their kids while people like you argue about tone. That silence from before? It came back, heavier. This time it pressed down on the whole room. Then, from somewhere backstage, a quiet clap. One of the youngest assistants, barely out of college, had started clapping without thinking. Just 2 soft claps. But the sound traveled. Someone else followed. Then another. No one cheered. It wasn't a party. It was something closer to a thank you. Something like relief. Piers flinched. Is this a talk show or a rally now? He snapped, turning toward the crew. Jasmine didn't miss a beat. It's a moment of accountability, she said, something this room hasn't seen in a while. The audience didn't explode. They didn't need to. What she said landed too clean for noise, and Piers, usually quick to recover, just sat there. Still, quiet. And just like that, the interview wasn't his anymore. It hadn't been for a while. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, the studio didn't go quiet. It went into chaos. Producers were whispering into headsets, PR staff typing frantic messages. Someone off stage was already calling the network's legal team just in case. But Jasmine? She didn't move. She just sat in her chair, still and calm, like none of. The noise around her touched her. No smirk, no sense of winning. She had said what needed to be said. That was enough. A few minutes later, her assistant Trina walked into the green room, phone in hand, screen lit up with notifications. She didn't speak right away, just held up the phone and showed Jasmine what was already all over Twitter. Clips of the interview, her quote about not asking for permission, the line about Piers storming off his own show. You're trending, Trina said, half smiling. Hashtag Jasmine owned it. Jasmine just nodded. That's going to annoy him, she whispered. They both knew it wasn't about that. By the time the sun came up the next day, the internet had moved into overdrive. News anchors were already talking about it. Podcasts, blogs, radio, every angle you could imagine. But Jasmine wasn't booked on a morning show. She wasn't giving interviews. She was sitting in a small room back home in Texas, meeting with her district team, flipping through reports about rent increases, school supplies, and a broken traffic light that hadn't been fixed in 2 months. No one in that meeting mentioned Piers Morgan. Jasmine didn't either, because that was never the point. Meanwhile, the clip kept spreading, but not just on political channels. It found its way into high school classrooms, into WhatsApp groups between moms, into church group chats. A teenage girl showed the video to her mother and said, "She talks like you." In a barbershop in Atlanta, someone said, "She didn't raise her voice once." And that was the thing. People weren't reacting to a performance. They were reacting to something they could feel deep down, something that didn't ask to be noticed. It just spoke. Later that evening, Jasmine returned to her hotel. She was about to take off her shoes when there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, a young black woman stood there, probably mid-20s, wearing a hotel uniform. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure if she should be there. "Sorry," the woman said quietly. "I know I'm not really supposed to do this. I saw what you did today, and I wanted to say thank you." Jasmine's face softened. "You're not bothering me." The woman smiled, just a little. "I'm usually the only one like me in the room. Meetings, training, everything. And I've been told I'm too much or hard to work with more times than I can count. Watching you today, I didn't feel so crazy." Jasmine stepped out into the hallway and looked her in the eye. "What's your name?" "Kaylee." "Kaylee," she said, "being direct isn't rude. It's being ready. You don't have to make yourself smaller so others feel bigger. Don't ever let them tell you otherwise." Kaylee's eyes filled with tears. "I needed to hear that," she said. "I think a lot of us did." They stood there for a quiet moment. No cameras, no lights, just two people finally feeling seen. A few days later, Jasmine spoke at a community event on the south side of El Paso. It wasn't flashy, just folding chairs, bottled water, and someone's uncle running sound from an old laptop. She didn't come to give a speech, she came to listen. And after hearing people talk about housing problems, police stops, job losses, one man finally asked, "How do we keep going when it feels like no one's really listening?" Jasmine stepped to the mic. She looked tired, but not defeated. The kind of tired that comes from working, not quitting. She paused, looked out over the crowd and said, "They don't listen until you make them." The room went still. You don't always get a camera. You don't always get a mic. But that doesn't mean your story doesn't matter. I didn't go on that show to go viral. I went because I was tired of asking for permission to be taken seriously. A boy in the back, barely 16, raised his hand. "I didn't know people like you existed," he said. Jasmine smiled. "People like you exist," she answered. "I just happened to have a mic that day." The room stayed quiet after she finished, not because no one cared, because everyone did. And then she added one last thing. "Courage isn't loud," she said. "Sometimes the quietest sentence in the room is the one that changes everything." The claps came slow, one by one, not rushed, not forced, just real. They weren't clapping because it was over. They were clapping because they understood.